Welcome back to the NutriMedical Report. We have the most dynamic guest on, and one of the most brilliant minds out there, as a believer as well, is Texe. His latest book is Robot Alchemy. And if you think this is sci-fi, if you think this is not real, if you think this is not the timeline of where our civilization is going, you're not paying attention. It's not just a sci-fi movie. These things have been researched for decades or longer. They've been written by people a century ago, including H.G. Wells' The Time Machine and many other books, 1984, and movies like Gattaca. The real timeline and the plan of the globalists is far more malevolent, evil, and cybernetic than you can imagine. And to show that is this new book, Robot Alchemy, by Texe. Tell us about the genesis of the book and give us some tidbits of what's inside.
Well, Dr. Bill, great to be on with you again, as always. You know, a lot of folks out there know me from other books, Codex Magica, Mysterious Monuments, and so forth. But right. they don't realize that actually I started out in the robotics field. Right. In fact, I'm author of several robot books. In fact, I'm the author of the very first personal robot book. Then I published the very first book on careers and jobs with robots. Then I did a book called The Great Robot Book. So, you know, I've been off of that for many years. I've sort of kept up on the side, you know, sort of like a hobby.
Yeah.
But I've been increasingly concerned because of the militarization of robots.
Well, even the drones are a good example, and they're now planning on having to be autonomous and make an autonomous decision to make a kill decision.
Absolutely, and then you know, recently I said, you know, this robot thing is just becoming incredible, and the thing is, as you mentioned, this is not science fiction. This is real, and you know, I think I began. I just flat out said I'm going to have to do something about this to warn people. We need a little bit of time ahead here. I think you know, the future is just galloping ahead, and all of us are sitting here. We're so worried about the cascade of events, everything, you know, from Boston to Sandy Hook. It just seems like so much is happening right now. But I'll tell you, this is going to come up very fast. Robots. And it's not, you know, it's not, you know, the old clunky metallic robots. You know, they're sort of lovable. Remember the one that was on Forbidden Planet?
Oh yeah.
And you know, it's just a sort of a lovable big old galoot. Well, you know, that's not what we're really talking about. But we are talking about robotic human beings, even. And under really a philosophy, but also it's coming to real life, called transhumanism.
Right.
The turning of human beings into cyborgs.
Yeah, exactly. The transhumanization, and this is very real, by the way. The brain interface chips. You know, as I say, in the future, and we won't put a date on it. The kid will be saying, "Hey, well, Johnny hit that he got his brain interface chip, Dad, and now he's on the SuperNet." And he's got an IQ of 5,000, and he's exploring the cyborg world and all these new planets and knowledge, and he's been able to conquer 20 languages in just 5 days, Dad. Why can't I get it?
Exactly. They're already experimenting about putting encyclopedic chips in human brains. So,
right.
You know, this probably will do away with formal educations.
You just download it, or you literally translate. The problem is, it's also you literally can download, like say, existing memories or skill sets, including athletic, into another person's brain. Whose brain really is it? I mean, at some point, the chunks of quote, the very nature of what you are isn't learned or created by effort, but literally downloaded directly into your cortex. So these skill sets are things you've imported.
All of these things are I would call them unintended consequences, but I believe many of them are consequences that are planned for our future. They want a new human being, one that does not rebel, one that does not resist, and so they can do that now. They can engineer we would call it psychosurgery, but really it's just putting a neural implant in the brain. And so we're talking about reality here. Vernon Inge, who was a well-known mathematician from California, wrote a book some years ago, and he invented a term called singularity. Singularity.
Yes.
And Vernon Inge said this. He said that it now is about 15 years from today, 2013. He says the development of robotics, cyborgs, androids and so forth, will develop so rapidly that in about 15 years from now, we will reach the era of singularity. That's when the robot will be more intelligent than human beings. Then, he said, the human era will be ended. Now, think about that. And just 15 years from now, the human era will be ended. Surely he didn't mean that. Surely that's not true.
Texe, what if I'm just going to propose this, but what if 10 years ago, 2003, that singularity was already reached, but it's an occult, a very highly classified project. It's involved with a virtual world project called, in the movies, The Matrix, but it exists. What if that artificial intelligence is already combing and connecting all databases on Earth in a virtual world? What if that database manager is as intelligent as a superior human being, but operates at 150 trillion times faster in terms of thought, has a perfect memory, and has absolute control not only of the databases, but also of interfaces to real things such as power networks, backup power for nuclear reactors, able to actually interface even with defense systems in multiple countries? What if that actually already existed?
Well, are you going to tell me it existed? It might, because I have not been able to discover that at this point.
It's not a might, actually. Back in the 90s, I took care of one employee that was for 6 years, but others for 2 years, at the Virtual World Project at Schriever Air Force Base. And their plan was by 2003 to have that system operational, because they had worked out a system of stochastic neural net modeling that modeled human thought patterns and were able to create a superior human being, in a sense, like a genius level, but now able to literally acquire, just almost like that Star Trek movie years ago, or show where, they had reached some kind of field effect and it caused someone to have literally an expanding, almost infinite intelligence. Right now, if you had a system like that, you'd have literally a beast computer that would literally have absolute omniscience of everybody in cyberspace. And as soon as you control their SIM, you control them, which is why there's a rush toward biometric IDs, a rush toward everything in a database, because this system does exist. I saw 3 whistleblowers recently from the National Security Agency trying to pretend that at some future they may be able to hack in and create a database in every American, and that's bad. They've done that for over 30-some years. So the idea that your phone, fax, emails, Twitter has not been totally monitored by the government and by these artificial intelligence systems is hogwash. They have the gallium arsenide quantum teraflop supercomputers, and the gallium arsenide quantum computing Cray 5 has a computing capacity of 100,000 Cray 4s. And
well, that's just incredible, isn't it? Well,
they already have it. So when they say that China or Japan has the biggest supercomputer, it's just smoke and mirrors. The systems exist exclusively in America.
Well, we have plenty of money to do it, don't we, with DARPA?
Yeah, exactly. Infinite budgets. Dov Zakheim disappeared with $2.3 trillion to 9/11 alone for the Pentagon, and that was chump change. Interesting. Welcome back. Well, the back cover of your book is quite telling. Text, it says, "Come and take a thrill excursion across the robot galaxy. Since time immemorial, humans have sought to build artificial creatures that move and talk. You will see and discover many of these fantastic creations in this book." But you also see depicted a startling future in which science and alchemy turn everything upside down. Robot life thrives, the machines conquer the workday world, and humanity shrinks before the advance of a superior life form. In fact, the latest movie, Oblivion, is a good example, though, talking about the storyline. It's about a super intelligent, if you want to call alien cybernetic life form, and what they really want to do is convert the remaining humanity, what I call Homo cyber sapiens. Where basically you're in a sense you're connected to a global mind, so you're not really an individual anymore. You're in a connected, literally real network, and you are just like the first contact, one of many.
The Borg actually is being created now by the U.S. Army, so right. that the whole Army division, for example, will see the same theme. They'll understand the same things. They'll think the same. And you say, well, this is just great, but it's not at all. When you think, do you really want to think like your fellow man does? I mean, think of the immorality, the evil in the world. Is this what we're going to think? But there's so much here. DARPA is being used, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They're spending billions of dollars for such projects as hunter-killer robots.
Yeah.
These are robots that can identify through facial recognition software and other means, even by smell. They can identify certain human beings. Let's say in a huge auditorium or stadium, go right to that individual and kill him or her.
Right.
The hunter-killer robots.
Now at the beginning of the Gulf War II, they had 6 of these SWORDs, or Operational Counter-Killer Robots. How many do you think they had at the end of the war? This is a classified source on this. They had 12,000 plus. And these were, some of them were ground-based, some of them were drones in the air, but they were basically, these robots could do a kill shot at your head at 2.5 miles accurately, or hit you with a taser bolt or directed energy weapon, including tunable sideband terahertz frequencies that could stimulate apoptosis of your cells, causing autodigestion of your tissues and a disseminated intravascular coagulopathy that causes your body to bleed to death and dissolve your tissues by autodigestion. And
right.
People say, no, they don't have these weapons. They say Iraq was a laboratory. It was the laboratory of Iraq.
Well, Americans really don't know the full story of Iraq to this day, do they? No. I mean, now we're having Iraq just fall apart. But we do have there around 80,000 civilian mercenaries, all being paid for by the U.S. government. So when they tell you, well, we don't have troops there anymore, of course, we do have troops, but we mainly have mercenaries, and they're guarding the pipelines from Iraq on over to Israel and the Mediterranean that end up in Red China. And so Red China is getting all the oil. That's been in the newspapers quite a bit. Even the New York Times talked about China getting the bulk of Iraqi oil.
So our treasure and our young people die or get dismembered and get PTSD and brain injuries, so the Chinese get the oil. That's an interesting balance sheet there, isn't it?
It is, and here's the whole point. China is getting Iraq oil. They're bringing it to China on the Mediterranean there, off of Israel and southern Lebanon. BP is assisting with the Chinese oil company in bringing up the oil from Iraq, and it's being brought out of the ground at $2 a barrel. That's all China, Red China, is paying for the oil. $2 a barrel. I believe this is intended to build up Red China. So Red China, of course, gets oil for $2. What is it on the world market today? $93 to $100. That's an amazing profit by Red China.
Well, of course, it's the globalists behind them.
Americans don't understand, but it's also the reason why Secretary of the Treasury Henry Paulson, under George W. Bush as president, made over 73 trips to Red China. Yeah. All of this was being set up. So Red China, is totally, their economy is based on oil now, and not on all these products that they've been shipping around the world. They're not selling a lot of products because of the recession that's been going on since 2008, but they are selling a lot of oil. That's why they have built all these new refineries in China, And by the way, Japan has to pay China $10 for so many cubic feet, whatever the measure is. I forgot it now, but they measure it by cubic feet. $10 per number of cubic feet for natural gas,
Right.
Because they can't use nuclear plants anymore, so
Right,
they've
they
all
switched to
converted to
natural
natural gas. $10 is being paid to Red China. If they could buy that from America, it would be wonderful, because we're selling it for $2. But the Obama administration refuses to give a license to United States companies. So Japan has a contract with Chesapeake, I believe it is, an American company, but it's so far not been allowed to use that contract. So can you imagine $10 they're charging the Japanese versus America, and we've got so much natural gas that we can't use it all. We're closing wells right now today.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in fact,
it's just an astonishing thing.
The liquefied natural gas was a contract that one company in the Bakken was going to fulfill all the Japanese needs at $5.50, and the Obama administration blocked it just a few months ago. This is obscene at the extreme. And right now, most people don't realize
China is our ally, you see, against North Korea and so forth.
By the way, BP was involved with getting oil and materials and petrochemicals to North Korea through China during the Korean War. You know that, right?
No, I didn't know that. No, I can't.
They were involved. There was a previous name for it, but it's the same British Petroleum Company that was doing that. So they didn't have petrochemicals, oil, and other materials, but they got them all through BP.
Wow. That is a Rothschild-owned corporation, BP.
Well, China is a Rothschild-owned corporation, too.
Well, China's long been, a lot of people don't know, but Sidney Shapiro and a guy named Epstein, they control the media and the banks and the finance, two Jews, very wealthy Jews, of Red China. I mean, Mao Zedong put one of them as charge of the media, the other one as charge of the banks and finance system. So the Jews were running the banking and the media, all of the newspapers and so forth, of Red China. Today, of course, many of in the West, are over there. Even Maurice Strong has a mansion in Beijing. He was former head of the environmental program at the United Nations. So we have a real incestual relationship with Red China, and as I talk about in my video, Die America Die.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, these globalists have totally created China right out of thin air, and they manage it, including Carlyle Group, etc.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Back in a moment with Texe Mars. Welcome back, and some people might not think that prophecy is important. I think prophecy is the key not only to evangelizing in this time, the time of the end, and if anybody doesn't think it's the time of the end, you just have to read the book of Daniel. It says, close up and seal the words of this book to the time of the end. One of the scriptures in Revelation was, and they gave a voice, and they gave literally life, was breathed into the image of the beast, and it spoke. And of course, this image of the beast managed the cashless system, managed basically the cybernetic model of everybody on Earth. So I believe what you talk about in the cover of your book, an avatar that controls a planetary kingdom of machines, is in fact in operation and being revealed in steps right now. We see it with the drones being deployed in America. I mean, we see it with this movie Oblivion, where the avatar arrives from space and creates a whole drone culture to kind of wipe out humanity, managed by basically, I'll blow the storyline, but managed by thousands of copies of two astronauts that were sent out into space and got captured by this avatar. They tried to tell everybody that the war was won by humans, but in fact the avatar took over and considered the human beings scavs or scavengers, and had drones everywhere killing them. So we're moving towards something that's very awful and not very far away.
Yeah, no one is really thinking of this. That's the reason I wrote the book. No one is really contemplating what is going to happen when we reach singularity. And the Defense Department, of course, is spending billions of dollars that we don't know anything about. It's sort of interesting. One of the top roboticists in the world is a man named Ray Kurzweil.
Right.
And I've been reading about Kurzweil for, well, even 35 years or so. Suddenly he turns up. He is now the chief or the director of development at Google. He's at Google.
Yeah,
Ray Kurzweil is now at Google. So, you know, whether it's Google or Microsoft, all of these people are into these things, but they're getting billions of dollars from our own federal government. I think what is happening now, we're going to implant superintelligence in these in robotic creatures, and we're going to make them part of the Borg. They're going to link the brains together, neural networks, as you well mentioned it being called.
Yeah.
And all of these will be linked together. The drones, there'll be swarms of drones. I talked with a roboticist, a good friend of mine who written a number of books. This was many years ago, Dr. Bill, and he had called me on something, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing right now? What are you working on? What book are you writing on?" This is when we both wrote robot books, and he said, "Well, I'm not writing a book." And he's very, very reluctant. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm working in Virginia." Does that give you any hint?
Langley.
Yeah. I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "You know, boy, I'd really like to tell you what I'm doing. I'm working on a special project. I was recruited with a bunch of scientists and engineers." He said, "Well, let me just tell you, let me ask you this. What if you could take a robot and make it so tiny that it was, you know, you couldn't see it even with your naked eye, and then you were to inject it into human beings?" So I said, "You mean like Fantastic Voyage, you know, that movie?"
Yeah.
He said, "Exactly." I said, "Yes." Well, he said, "Well, we're doing something like that, but I can't say anymore. It's all classified." Well, he told me enough right there. You know, they were into nano robots, and here they were injecting human victims, you might say, or subjects with nano robots. Now they can put these in the brain, into your body with a needle, and bingo. You know, at any given time, they can cause your heart to explode, your brain to implode, and so you know you're a walking dead person. You don't even know it. So this is the kind of things that they have now. And by the way, that was that was about 1990. So that's 25 years ago when this gentleman told me that. So it's
pretty crazy, hey?
Yeah, it really is. By the way, one of the robots that the military has developed is called, listen to this now, Dr. Bill, the Eater robot, And the reason they call it Eater is because it can actually, you know, instead of gas and oil and instead of a combustion engine, it is driven by biomass. You know, they can take sticks, leaves, or get this, actual bodies of dead human beings and feed it to the robot, and it will live on. Now that's it's sort of like Twilight or one of these.
So we got a new term for it. Then we're going to call it a zombot.
Exactly. They should have called it the zombie, but they call it the Eater robot. It can live on dead human bodies. So out in the field, if you're killing people in some place, well, don't worry, you're going to have plenty of fuel. It'll just go along and eat up all the human bodies that are there. This is grotesque for human beings to think of instruments like this, but they are real. The Eater robot is real. You can Google it up. But I think it just, we're talking about the level of the fantastic right now.
Yeah, and it's in some ways, as I mentioned on the break, it's not in the future. It's already happened. Some of these things haven't been fully revealed. One of the things that happened in October of 1998, I done a talk at the old church that Catherine Coleman did at a conference, evangelism conference for the Prophecy Club back in 1998. For about 90 minutes, I took over the conference when Jonathan, the evangelist, was South Africa, was sick, so I took over the conference. And afterward, one of the guys that was in the audience said he was a senior scientist at Lockheed Martin, so he wanted to meet me in Lodo a few days later. So I met him in a cafe, and he actually gave me the patent for the systems that they were developing for the Mark of the Beast. And the fact is, I was an employee for the St. Francis Hospital CCOM, and without cutting the story a little short, I've actually been inside the actual quantum array at Schriever Air Force Base, underground, miles down, for the actual virtual world project of the Matrix supercomputer, the central node. Now, there's other nodes of it in England and elsewhere around the world, all connected. And these other database acquisition sites, like the new one being built in Utah, 3 million square feet, is basically just if you call it a big vacuum or suction to pull in data from everywhere, collate and pre-process it before it goes to these supercomputers. Why spend so much money on these projects? Is because they've created a cybernetic copy of Earth, and they want to have drones to monitor us and feed more data to this giant machine. So they'll have literally everything. They'll be able to look through the side of your house, know where you're in your bathroom or your kitchen. They'll be able to check your GPS coordinates on your cell phone, even if it's turned off. They can track it. People aren't aware of that. Every phone, fax, and email has always been analyzed, not just recently. It's always been analyzed by
Dr.
proper software.
And this has all occurred in our lifetimes.
Right.
Yours and mine. And
right.
So you can understand the technology that we're now acquiring. When the
right.
iPhone came out just a few years ago, I was just amazed. Here's an entire computer in the palm of your hand. They can access the whole world. And of course, now we have even more than that. But we've got 3D machines. When I was researching robotics, I read of some guy who has created a sort of a home-type robot that'll move about by computer and do things. And he says, I have decided to give the whole world a gift of my robot. If you've got a 3D printing machine, you can print out my robot. Now think about that. So, there are 3D printing machines. That's a new industry that you can literally, it's like the old teletransporter, like Dr. Spock gets in and, he's sent somewhere.
It's like the replicator on the Star Trek.
Printer is.
Yeah, it's like the replicator on Star Trek. They don't need to have a storage system for food. They just replicate it from energy.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty. It looks good, but it's really bad. Back in a moment with Texe Mars. Robot Alchemy, the latest book. You want to get it. Back in a moment. Welcome back. So people say, you're just trying to scare people. No, we're trying to evangelize you. We want you to know that God's not nervous. That's why he put it in the book of Revelation through the prophet John. He put it through many scriptures in Old and New Testament, and all of it's written for our time. It's not written for people 100 years from now or 1,000 years ago, like the preterists. It's written for us. And in fact, it says that there will be a overall supercomputer avatar that will literally control a planetary kingdom of machines as a proxy. The beast machine, if you want to call it, isn't just a single machine. It has a central node or primary brain, which is at Schriever Air Force Base, Falcon, Colorado. Now, how does Deagle know that? Well, I won't give all the details, but I had a supernatural visitation back in October of 1993, and by July 1994, I actually walked through the same facilities as I was brought by that supernatural visitor. And I was given security clearance at a Q level, which means I saw and worked with some of the most advanced projects that you can imagine. And not secondhand, but firsthand. And because I have a very good memory, I was able to often have people visiting me to find out what was going on in parallel projects, because you had to follow your little green, red, or purple line to your specific building or room, and you had all kinds of biometric security clearances to get to even facility and go to usually lockdown for a month. These workers. So I got to know basically some of the most awful things in history. And this is all planned, and the central new financial system they're going to erect after they crash the current one, which I think is in the works, is a cashless system that's based on biometrics. And that's coming. And people say, no, it's not moving to the mark of the beast. I'm sorry to tell you, our victory is in Jesus. It's not in the idea that where he says, how long shall it be holy and true to the people? The holy people are crushed. And in the book of Daniel, it talks about above the river Eli. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, Elu. The angel told Daniel that it would be a times, and half a time. So it means there would be a period of 1,260 days of Hebrew days where the truth would go forward from the Jewish sacrifice starting on the Temple Mount until the holy people were crushed and the sacrifice was cut off and Christians and Jews died by the millions. That's where we're heading.
Yeah, people in America, we really are. That's why I wrote this book, Robot Alchemy.
Right.
Alchemy is a very unusual word that means witchcraft or occult secrets.
Yeah.
And that's really what this really is.
Right.
They're building life out of inanimate objects.
Right.
And it really is. Let's face it. These things are alive. They're putting in the life that they want them to have. I was recently reading. This is what really made me decide to write this book. At Foxconn, which is the largest corporation in the world in Red China.
Right.
Now, Foxconn makes things for General Electric. It makes all the Apple iPhones. It makes stuff for, all these American companies. They have these huge plants, Dr. Bill. At one plant, there are 420,000 workers. Now, they treat them like just worker bees. They treat them like drones, to use that word again.
Yeah.
The working conditions are pitiful. They work 6 to 7 days a week. They make a pittance.
And they don't have safety either. When they're using grinders with aluminum dust, they can have an aluminum dust explosion. And they've had them there. They have so many suicides, they put nets so that if they try to jump off the roof.
That is exactly what they had to put nets around the perimeter of all the buildings because so many employees were going to the top of the buildings and committing suicide by jumping off.
Right.
So that's the situation. Now, the head of Foxconn, this Chinese CEO, got so angry at the workers, if you could imagine, that he was mistreating. He got so angry at them that he decided to bring in robots. He said, I can replace you people with robots. Now, Foxconn has 4 million workers. He says, I'm going to bring in 4 million robots. And he has brought them in. They call them Foxbots. And they've already got 10,000 robots in their factories. So Apple, seeing what these robots could do, Stephen Cook, the new head of Apple, what's his name, died, Stephen Jobs. Mr. Cook said, well, we can do that in America. He's going to build an Apple plant in California that uses almost nothing but robots. So joblessness, we haven't seen anything yet. All this robot revolution is just beginning. We see what happened with auto manufacturers. They're going to bring back not jobs, but all the manufacturing to America, but it's going to be done by intelligent machines.
Right.
And that's happening right now.
The average middle class, the only job still will be lower paid MIC jobs under 30 hours a week because Obamacare will not force the employer to pay for health insurance, so they're not going to employ anymore, so you have to have 2 part-time jobs to be equivalent to 1.
Because of Obamacare, employers everywhere are looking for ways to cut out human beings. They're just, we're just a production cost. We're useless eaters.
Right.
And believe me, the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, they're looking for robots to come in, and you're going to find, the kitchens are going to be automated, everything. There'll probably be just a voice there, just like when you call somebody now, there's always a machine voice. You probably go up and it'll be a machine voice that says, how can I help you today? It's going to be a robotic device. So we're going to see that in the future. In every way, things are going to change. But where are they going to employ all the millions of us that are going to be laid off of work in the next 10 to 15 or 20 years? It's an amazing thing.
They're not going to employ them. They're going to basically inter them.
Well, that's. I think there's a reason why Janet Napolitano of the Homeland Security Department has ordered the 2 billion. Is it hollow shell bullets?
Right. Well, we talked about this yesterday with a timeline with Lowell Ponte, Dr. Mike Kaufman. This is what I suspect. It's not prophetic, and if I had a prophetic word, I'd say it. But my analysis is, number one, the most likely event to happen is a parallel avian flu plague with the collapse of the bond market and the economy. And that's likely to happen about a 90% chance in the next 2 years.
Well, the Fed Reserve now is propping up everything with money out of thin air.
Funny money. Yeah,
we do know that
they want to collapse.
That's now being admitted on Wall Street. They're basically saying, get in now while the getting is good. The market is flying high, because the Fed is pumping it up with fake money.
They're also pushing people out of their savings account, trying to frighten people with Cypriotization in Cyprus. And the Canadian government put it in their 2013 budget, and it was in the Dodd-Frank bill, that your bank account is now an unsecured investment in the bank and can be bailed in. And the whole idea is to force people into the stock market, so when they crash the stock market, like in 1929, which the banks do, they will steal all your money, not just some of it. So what I see coming...
obviously, Cyprus, what happened in Cyprus to the people... it only involved about $9 billion, but it was a showcase trial, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was to frighten everybody else in Europe and the Western world so that they would frighten them out of their bank account. And then they tried to frighten people out of gold, but people were smarter. They realized there's only paper gold they dropped, so their people are buying up at a 30 to 50% plus premium to buy physical gold and silver. So,
isn't that strange now that gold is being sold out everywhere, the physical gold, but the stocks and the ETFs are all going down, down, down?
Well, that's what we can expect, is a disjunction between the two. So that's number one. Number two, I expect that the Ison comet will cause a major superstorm on the sun that will strobe the Earth in the southern hemisphere this coming November and wipe out South American crops and to knock out a lot of their electrical grid and satellites and probably have some effects on it. But we're heading into a worldwide major famine. That's the next major factor.
It's a man-created famine, Dr. Bill, being created for us.
It's also a famine of what I call the seeds of famine, which are GM seeds that you can't replant them by if you try to replant them, you get less and less crops until eventually they completely don't reproduce. But some of these newer seeds are even made to be aluminum resistant from the nanoparticles are put in the upper atmosphere. So basically they're conspiring for mass global genocide.
Absolutely. I do pray that people will get Robot Alchemy. They will be shocked at what they read. By the way, it has hundreds of color photographs in it.
How do they get it, Texe? Your website is?
Yeah, our website is powerofprophecy.com.
Powerofprophecy.com. We need to continue this dialogue in a week or two and regularly, because you have so many amazing books. Power of Prophecy, your newsletter, your tapes. You do your homework.
Well,
again, I consider you have an apostolic ministry that's essential for people to know at the time of the end. Thank you.
God bless you, my friend.
Take care. We'll be back in a moment with hour number 2, Emile de Toffel, SEMF, and Dr. Bill Pollack. Then hour 3, amazing author Victor Thorne, Conspiracy in the New World Order Assassins, 3rd book, back in a moment.